There comes a point in a life, perhaps in every life that dares to be truly lived, where the floor gives way. It is not a gradual sinking, not a gentle decline you can prepare for. It is a sudden and total collapse. The world you knew, the person you thought you were, the very ground of your being, vanishes. One day you are walking on solid earth, and the next you are in free fall through an endless silent void. Let me tell you about a man named Arthur. Arthur was a successful architect, a man who built things. He built skyscrapers that touched the clouds, and he built an identity for himself that was just as tall, just as solid, made of glass and steel. His entire sense of self was defined by his title, by the respect in the eyes of his clients, by the clean, sharp lines of his designs. He was Arthur the architect. It was not just what he did. It was who he was. His life had a blueprint. Every day was a calculated move. Every relationship, a functional joint in the structure of his ambition. He was in control, or so he thought. His dark night began not with a bang, but with a quiet, insidious crack in the foundation. A recession hit. A major project, his masterpiece, was canceled. Then another. The phone, once a source of constant opportunity, fell silent. The accolades stopped. The identity of Arthur the architect began to feel hollow. He would look in the mirror and see not a creator of skylines, but a stranger riddled with a quiet panic. The role he had played with such conviction suddenly felt like a script written for someone else, in a language he no longer spoke. This was not a bad mood. This was an ontological crisis. The city of his identity was being leveled, and in the deafening silence that followed, amidst the dust and the rubble of a life in ruins, he was left with one single, crushing certainty. He had been abandoned. Abandoned by the world, by his profession, by the very God of order and reason he had worshipped. He was utterly and terrifyingly alone. What Arthur was experiencing, and what you may be experiencing, is seen by the great psychologist Carl Jung, not as a pathology, not as a failure to be corrected, but as a brutal, necessary rite of passage. It is the death of the false self. The persona, the carefully constructed mask you have been presenting to the world and to yourself, has finally shattered. Jung would not offer pity. He would offer a knowing, compassionate congratulations. Because the life you were living, the life Arthur was living, was too small for the soul that is trying to be born. The ego construct, the blueprint you mistook for your entire being, has reached its limit. It must die so that something more real, more vast, and more true can finally emerge. A genuine life is waiting for you, not in some distant future, but right here, in the heart of the ruins. The desolation is not an endpoint. It is the holy ground of your own becoming. This feeling of profound isolation, this sense that you have been cast out into a cold, indifferent cosmos, is perhaps the most painful part. Why does it feel so personal, so targeted? It is because the universe, in its severe and uncompromising wisdom, is removing every single crutch. Think about it for a moment. What was your primary crutch? Was it a job title, like Arthur's? Was it the reflection of yourself you saw in a partner's adoring eyes? Was it the security of a financial number in your bank account? Was it the certainty of a rigid religious or political belief system? Be honest with yourself. What did you lean on so heavily that, without it, you feared you would collapse? These things were not supports. They were cages. Comfortable, gilded cages that kept you safe but small, that defined your limits and prevented you from discovering the boundless expanse of your own being. And now, the doors have been flung open. You have been thrust out into the wilderness of your own soul, Arthur was no longer Arthur the architect. He was just Arthur. And he had no idea who that was. The terror he felt was the terror of absolute freedom. For as long as he had his crutch, he could avoid the terrifying and exhilarating task of discovering who he was without it. Now, he has no choice. The universe has not abandoned him, nor has it abandoned you. It has paid you the ultimate compliment. It has decided that you no longer need training wheels. You are ready to learn to fly, and the only way to do that is to be pushed from the nest. And what of that voice? That incessant chattering narrator in your head, the CEO of your inner world. For Arthur, this voice was his superpower. It was the voice of the architect, planning, strategizing, judging, analyzing every angle, mitigating every risk. It built his career. It built his life. And in his dark night, it went silent. The problems he faced, a crisis of meaning, a loss of identity, had no blueprint. There were no calculations to be made. His master tool was useless. The ego, that part of our consciousness that says I, has built its kingdom on the illusion of control. And now, it has encountered a situation so profound that it has simply short-circuited. It has run out of scripts. Its maps are useless. Its compass is spinning wildly. And so, it falls silent. This silence is not empty. It is pregnant with possibility. For the first time, with the chattering ego out of the way, you have the opportunity to hear a different voice, a deeper, quieter, more resonant frequency that has been there all along, drowned out by the noise of your own mind. This is the voice of the self, the timeless, whole, and authentic core of your being. Arthur began to notice it on his long, aimless walks. It wasn't a voice of words, but of impulses. A sudden urge to turn down a street he'd never seen, a strange pull towards an old bookstore, a feeling of peace watching a leaf fall. The silence of the ego is the necessary condition for the voice of the soul to be heard. You have been living in a small, noisy room your entire life, believing it was the whole mansion. Now, the door to the rest of the house has opened, and the vast, silent corridors are inviting you to explore. It is crucial to understand this one. Simple truth. You are not experiencing a breakdown. You are experiencing a clearing. Imagine Arthur's life as one of his own skyscrapers. It was impressive, but it was built on a faulty foundation, not of sand, but of the unexamined need for external validation. The structure itself was sound, but the ground beneath it was hollow. And now, the ground has shifted. The deep, bedrock reality of his soul has begun to stir, and the gleaming tower of his identity could not withstand the tremor. It had to come down. This process of demolition is messy, chaotic, and terrifying. It feels like destruction. It feels like failure. But it is the most hopeful sign in the world. You cannot build a sacred temple on top of a corporate office building. The old site must be cleared. This chaos is not the end of your life. It is the necessary and sacred preparation for the beginning of a true one. You are not a victim of a random catastrophe. You are the foreman of a divine construction project, and the first phase is always demolition. As you sit in the darkness of this cleared ground, a new kind of work begins. This is not the work of doing, but the work of being. It is the work of learning to see in the dark. And the first thing you must learn to see is your own shadow. In Jungian psychology, the shadow is everything within us that we have repressed and denied. It is our inner darkness. Let's return to Arthur. As his career crumbled, he found himself consumed by a venomous, burning envy. He would scroll through architecture magazines or websites and feel a rage so potent it made his hands shake. He saw his former colleagues winning awards, starting new projects, and he hated them for it. He, Arthur, the man of cool logic and professional composure, was filled with a petty, ugly resentment, and he was deeply ashamed of it. This was his shadow, erupting into view. His immediate impulse was to suppress it, to distract himself, to tell himself he was better than that. But the feeling only grew stronger, festering in the dark. The work of the dark night is to stop running and finally invite these messengers in. Here is a practice. The next time a negative emotion arises, envy, rage, profound laziness, do not push it away. Instead, get quiet. Find a place to sit. Acknowledge the feeling without judgment. Hello, envy. I feel you. You are welcome here. Then get curious. Ask it a question, not with your analytical mind, but with an open heart. What are you here to show me? What part of my own power have I disowned? Arthur, in a moment of desperate honesty, finally did this. He sat with his envy. He let it burn without flinching. And he asked it, "What do you want?" The answer that arose from the silence was not, "I want their success." It was, "I want to create again. I want to build something that matters. Something for me, not for a client, not for an award." His envy wasn't just petty resentment. It was his own creative life force, repressed and distorted, screaming for his attention. It was a compass, pointing directly to his deepest unfulfilled desire. His anger at the world was the guardian of his own neglected passion. This is the gold in the shadow. Your shame is often a guardian of your deepest vulnerability, trying to protect you from being hurt. Your laziness may be the voice of your exhausted body, or a protest from your soul against a path that has no meaning. Your fear contains the seed of your greatest courage. The work is not to become a perfect person, free of darkness. It is to become a complete person, one who has the courage to embrace and integrate all of who they are. This journey into the shadow leads directly to the next great lesson of the dark night, the illusion of control. The modern world is built on this illusion. Arthur's entire life was a testament to it. And the dark night is the experience of this entire paradigm utterly failing. It is the moment you realize, with a terror that gives way to a strange kind of peace, that you are not in control. You never were. The harder Arthur tried to network, to force new opportunities, to rebuild his old life, the more the doors slammed in his face. He was paddling with all his might against a powerful, unseen current. Consider this small fable. A man in a small boat was caught in a storm. He was a master sailor, and he fought the storm with all his skill, tacking against the wind, wrestling with the rudder. He fought for hours, until his muscles screamed and his spirit was about to break. He was losing. In a moment of sheer exhaustion, he let go of the rudder and collapsed. He had given up. But the moment he let go, the boat, no longer fighting the waves, turned and found the rhythm of the swell. It was tossed and turned. Yes, but it was no longer on the verge of capsizing. By surrendering his fight, he had aligned himself with the power of the sea, and it carried him through the storm. This is surrender. It is not passive resignation. It is the conscious decision to stop fighting a battle you cannot win. For Arthur, this moment came on one of his aimless walks. He was trying to figure out his next move, his mind racing with useless plans. He walked for hours until he was physically exhausted. Finally, he sat on a park bench, defeated, and he just stopped. He stopped planning. He stopped trying to solve the unsolvable problem of his life. He simply sat and watched the people walk by. He watched the clouds. He let go of the oars. A miracle happens when you let go. The struggle ceases. You are still in the dark, on an unknown river, but you are no longer at war with it. You are flowing with it. In this state of surrendered presence, Arthur began to notice things. He noticed the intricate ironwork on an old gate, the way a child laughed with pure, uninhibited joy. He felt a stirring not of ambition, but of simple appreciation, of beauty. By relinquishing control, he had tapped into a power and an intelligence far greater than his own. He was learning to navigate not by force, but by feel. This is the art of letting go, when you cease the war with your own shadow and surrender the illusion of control. You arrive at the final stage of the inner work, integration. True wholeness is born from this work. Most of us live in a state of perpetual inner conflict. There is the good me and the bad me. For Arthur, there was Arthur, the brilliant architect, and Arthur, the failed, envious man. He spent all his energy trying to be the former and denying the latter. This fragmentation is the source of all our anxiety. Integration is the process of signing a peace treaty with yourself. It is the radical act of ceasing to label any part of yourself as unacceptable. Imagine you are the ruler of a kingdom, the kingdom of you. For years, you have been told that certain citizens of your kingdom, anger, fear, sadness, laziness, are criminals. So you have locked them in the dungeons. You spend a tremendous amount of energy keeping them imprisoned. Your kingdom is peaceful, but it is a sterile, half-empty peace. The work of integration is to walk down to the dungeons, open the cells, and listen to the stories of these exiled citizens. You discover that anger is not a criminal, but a powerful warrior who is sworn to protect your kingdom's borders. Fear is not a coward, but a wise scout who points out potential dangers. Sadness is not a victim, but a deep well of compassion that allows you to connect with others. Wholeness is the moment you grant amnesty to all the exiled parts of yourself. You bring them out of the dungeon and give them a seat at the royal council table. You listen to their wisdom. You are still the ruler. You still make the final decisions. But now you rule over a complete and vibrant kingdom. Arthur began this process when he stopped shaming his envy and instead listened to its message about his need to create. He started sketching again, not for clients, but for himself. He drew buildings that could never be built, fantastical structures born from pure imagination. He wasn't Arthur the architect anymore, nor was he Arthur the failure. He was simply Arthur, a man who loved to draw, a man who felt anger, a man who felt peace. He was finally becoming whole. As you emerge from the deepest part of the darkness, you realize that you have been fundamentally changed. You have acquired new capacities. The first is a profound and unshakable intuition. It is a deep, quiet knowing that resonates in your body. You have learned to trust this inner compass because you saw how it guided you through the darkest night when all external maps failed. The second gift is the transformation of your relationship with your own past. The pain you endured is no longer seen as a liability. It has become your most valuable asset. It is a highly sophisticated, built-in navigation system. Every scar is a map. Arthur's painful loss of his career became his greatest guide. It taught him to recognize the difference between ambition that comes from the ego and creation that comes from the soul. His history of suffering became his greatest source of strength. And finally, you realize you no longer fear the storm. For most of your life, you structured your existence around the avoidance of pain. But having walked through the heart of the hurricane and survived, you understand something fundamental. The goal is not to avoid the storm. The goal is to become so rooted in your own being that you can draw strength from the wind. You have discovered a place within you, the integrated self, that is untouched by the turbulence of external events. Arthur found he no longer needed the world to call him an architect, to feel the joy of creation. His sense of worth was no longer external, it was internal. He was no longer a skyscraper, vulnerable to the shifting markets. He was a mountain, rooted in the earth of his own being. There is a profound shift from seeing yourself as a fragile thing that needs to be protected from life, to seeing yourself as a force of nature in your own right. This is the unshakable peace that is the ultimate promise of the dark night. So if you are there now in that darkness, in that deafening silence, in that place of utter desolation, where it feels like the entire universe has turned its back on you, listen closely. You have not been abandoned. You have not failed. You have been chosen. This is not a punishment. It is a profound act of trust. The universe, in its infinite intelligence, has finally deemed you ready. Ready to let go of the life you thought you wanted, so you can receive the life that has been waiting for you. Ready to shed the skin of the person you were pretending to be, so you can finally stand in the magnificent, terrifying, and glorious truth of who you are.